Hello, my name is Andy Latham, and I'd like to welcome you to our Application Designer C# scripting course. This course is designed to be an overview of the C# customization capabilities within the App Designer and custom panes, and it will be describing the fundamentals of how the technology works. But please note that although we're using a new C# scripting language within the Application Designer and custom panes, the language itself does not change any of the functionality of the App Designer or the custom pane controls. So the courses that have gone before us, 8 or 9 of them now, are still relevant, although in this course we are replacing the VB script with the C# scripting language. There are some prerequisites. I'm assuming that you are familiar with the Syspro App Designer and custom pane technologies, and although not essential, it would be easier if you have experience in developing apps or custom panes using VB script as the current development language. What we're going to be covering in this course is as follows. I'm going to go through an overview explaining what C# is and why Syspro have decided to use it. We'll be running through a series of demos to show you the changes to the code editor, looking at the code and how it works, and also discussing some of the fundamentals of C# and getting some of the vocabulary correct so that when you're using support calls and things, you can get that right. And then we'll move on to looking at other features such as debugging your code using Visual Studio, using C# code generation and VB script conversion using the new Syspro AI features. And then lastly, we'll be looking at documentation resources and so on like that. So what we want to do is kick off, and we'll start with the overview. In this section, I'm going to be discussing what C# is and why Syspro use it, and a number of other factors. Now, the next few slides will be very, very wordy, and the reason I've popped them in is in case any of you need to explain to the powers that be, maybe it's a partner talking to an existing customer, or a partner or a new customer, or indeed a user explaining to a management team why you would want to move to using C# scripting. I thought some of these words might help. So we're just going to move on through 2 or 3 slides, and I'll try and paraphrase them rather than actually reading through to you. So first of all, what is C# and why does Syspro use it? Well, C# is known as an object-oriented language. It's developed by Microsoft, and it runs in something called the .NET framework. It is one of the most powerful and popular programming languages today, and is responsible probably for huge libraries of the Microsoft operating system. The key thing here is it is being actively developed by Microsoft and is constantly being improved. So it is actually one of the latest technologies. Syspro have introduced C# as an additional language, so you can choose, and we'll see this in a short while, whether you want to use VB script or C#. And you use it in custom panes and App Designer because it provides far greater flexibility than VB script. It's far more robust than the scripting language, and frankly, at some stage in the future, one may imagine that with C# being so powerful, VB script may well be dropped off the development environment from a Microsoft point of view. So Syspro have provided a number of mechanisms to enable developers to debug the C# code using Microsoft's Visual Studio, and I'll show you that a little bit later on. It can tools to generate C# code via the AI tools within Syspro, which is quite remarkable, really. And those same tools allow you to convert VB script, your existing VB script, to C# for existing customizations. So this development has been designed to provide a clear technical path forward for Syspro customers, making sure that you can leverage the latest Microsoft technology. And with the mechanisms being able to convert VB script into C#, it will also allow you to preserve the intellectual property of any legacy code that you have actually written. Now, for those of you who are long serving in the Syspro community and users of many, many years, this style of Syspro introducing a new technology and allowing you to migrate slowly is something you'll be familiar with. I mean, they have always provided you with a way of migrating forward onto the very, very latest stuff, which I think is actually really, really good. So anyway, that's what C# is and why Syspro are using it. Let's have a look quickly now at what versions of Syspro actually support it. So releases up to Syspro 8 2024 are solely VBScript, and it's simple as that. The new version, Syspro 8 2025, which was released in September of 25, is the first version that allows you to choose whether you want to use VBScript or C#. And C# is using App Designer and custom paints. So that's where you are, and if you're on older versions of Syspro, then you will need to migrate up to the latest, and it's good policy anyway to be up to the latest versions of Syspro. So let's have a quick now look at what the fundamental differences are between C# and VBScript. So first of all, C# is a compiled language. The source code is taken by a compiler, and it creates what they call the intermediate language, which can then create an executable application within the Windows environment. It uses a Microsoft .NET framework and the Microsoft Common Language Runtime to be able to do that. So that takes intermediate language and runs it as a program as part of the Windows operating system. And it is a language used for professional software development. In fact, Syspro use it for developing huge chunks of the product, and most Microsoft developers would use the C# for that. And it is what we call an object-orientated and strongly typed language. So what this actually means is that data types are declared, and once they have been declared, they can't be changed. So let's just have a quick look at that, and what I mean by that. A little bit of code here, very, very simple. So here we are defining a variable called a number of characters, or no chars. It's an integer, and it is set to a value of 0. So this is how you would declare a variable within C#. Below it is a similar sort of syntax. I'm saying I want a data type of a string. I'm calling it the variable name str, and I want you to put the word Andy into that variable. And now we come to the real neat thing about C# is that once the variable str is declared, it inherits all the characteristics of the data type of string. And as an example here, without having to do any other work, I can actually say to C# the variable number of characters, which was an integer, is equal to my variable dot length. And my variable, without me having to define anything else, fully understands that the length of the word Andy is 4 characters. In a similar manner, the data type of string also has a method called contains, and therefore without me having to do any other programming at all, I can say if my variable contains the word Andy, do something. So this is what we call about being object oriented, because I have declared variables as an object, and then once I've done that, my variable inherits the characteristics of that object without me having to do anything at all. And it's absolutely remarkable what you're able to do. And we'll see bits of this a little bit later on. For VBScript, however, and those of you who've used it, it is an interpreted language. The source code is interpreted at runtime, run line by line, by what we call the Windows scripting host. It is what we call loosely typed. So you don't have to define what type of a variable. You just simply say, I want a variable called Andy or str. And the VBScript will interpret what it's going to be. And you can change it in its lifetime, which you can't do in C#. And it is not object orientated. So because you don't have to define the data types, it doesn't inherit anything. So the language itself, VBScript, is focused on scripting and automation tasks in Windows. It's used on huge number of websites all worldwide. Goodness knows how many pages will have VBScript on. So it will be supported into the future. You can imagine the millions and millions of websites that are actually using it. So that gives you hopefully a little bit of an overview of what C# is, why Syspro have actually introduced it, and what the differences may be. So what we're going to do now is start to move on into the App Designer code editor and have a look at some of those changes.